What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about bearing installation. I got a Rockstar Pro aluminum hub right here. Sometimes the bearings can be difficult to get in there, so I'm going to give you a few tricks that you can use at home to get the job done. What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of a new series that I'm doing called In the Ghetto. And what it means is, in the shop, in the factory, we got lots of tools, specialized tools for pressing bearings and doing all types of things, but you don't have those in your house. So the whole thing is basically doing R&D stuff, but using tools that you're going to have in your average house, garage, things like that. So sometimes you got to improvise. Today, we're doing bearing installation on an aluminum hub, the Rockstar Pro. Alright, so on the nylon stuff, you're always going to be able to press these in by hand. On these, it depends on the tolerance. Everything has a tolerance. The bearings, the Rockstar Pro, kind of inside diameter of this hole. So it kind of depends. Some are going to be easier than others to get in. And I have examples here of a few different ones. The first one is basically one that shows you can actually, if you're strong and you got decent, you're going to be able to kind of press it in there by hand with your thumbs, right? That's plan A. If that doesn't work, there's kind of a few other techniques, but before I go into those, I want to give you a little bit of theory on why you're going to want to use one technique and potentially not another. So, what we got is a whiteboard. Now, speaking of In the Ghetto, my daughter took my actual whiteboard, which kind of like made me a little bit upset, but I got kind of a improvised whiteboard here, a little bit smaller. I can handle it. Alright, so this is a bearing, cross-section of a bearing. So basically, you guys know what a bearing looks like. You got an inner race and an outer race. Alright, so the outer race looks like that. This is a cross-section that we're talking about. Inner race, it looks like this. Okay, cross-section. And between them, we got what is the ball. Okay, so when we're talking about, the reason that I want to talk about these kind of two different races is it matters in terms of the pressure that you apply to press a bearing into. What we're going to be doing is we're pressing it into a hub that looks kind of like that. Bam. So here's our hub. Now, when you're pressing it into a hub, there's going to be resistance along this kind of outer wall. You can imagine there's a little bit of friction there. So when we do an actual bearing press, a bearing press is a giant machine, really, really flat. Okay, it comes up here, and it applies pressure to the outer race, all right, and pushes it in there. So it's a perfect machine for that. Since you don't have a bearing press, like I said, a lot of times, you're just going to use your thumbs to press it in. If you don't have, or if you can't actually press it in, then the main thing, there's a few different ways to do it. Some people will use a truck and actually kind of like push the hub down onto put the bearing on the truck and push that down on there. The only problem with that is that the truck actually only kind of contacts the inner race here. So the axle's kind of through there. And when you press it in, the load actually has to travel through the inner race, through the bearings to the outer race. So you can actually damage your the balls of your bearings when that happens. So the trick I'm going to show you now, like I said, I had one that was kind of easy before. This guy presses in with your thumbs, no problem. This guy, I've just kind of collected these over the years. This guy, you can almost get in, but you can't kind of get it in all the way. So that's about as far as I can get that guy with my thumbs. So the first trick is basically it's called a table flip. So basically flip the hub over, all right, onto a table, any type of surface, and press on the back side of the hub. Now the reason I'm saying a table, like I said, you can actually do a truck if you want, like I said before. So you got an axle, you can load this guy on there and you can press down. But the problem is the truck is only actually contacting the inner race. So like I said, the forces actually have to travel through the ball to get to the outer race where the friction is, and you can damage your ball. So that is one option, and we tell people, okay, look, do that sometimes. You can. Most likely you're not going to damage the balls, but you might. So this is just giving you kind of like another tip is if you do it the same thing but do it onto a flat surface, maybe a vise or something like that, and you press on the back side of the hub, Well, then that still gets a nice flat surface that is contacting the outer race. So it's outer race against outer race. That's what you want, all right? But it gives you more surface area to press on than actually trying to press with your thumbs. That might hurt. It gives you a whole back of a hub to kind of press down on. So that, on that one, actually works. Couldn't do it by thumbs, but you can do it with a table flip. Now, occasionally, you might not be able to do an actual table. Maybe your hands aren't enough. But you can do the same thing on the ground. Pop it down, even stand on it so you can get a little more pressure, all right? So that's called a floor flip, I guess. But so those are two options. Now sometimes there'll be one that you actually, even with the weight of your body, you're not going to be able to even do the floor flip. So this is one that's got a really, really tight tolerance. You can kind of get it started, but I tried this earlier and I can't get the floor flip to work. But next step, like I said, ideally, in a shop, you got an arbor press, an actual kind of bearing press. In your house, you don't, but hopefully you have a vise. If you don't, I'll give you another option after that. But if you do have a bench vise, then it's basically, a bench vise is incredibly effective. It's a screw press, basically. So this is a very, very difficult bearing to get into, to get in. But you'll see with the screw vise, it's just easy. It's like nothing. It just kind of melts in there. So this is an incredibly effective tool for applying pressure. So that, you can see basically, yeah, made short work of that. Now, if you don't have a bench vise, because we're talking in the ghetto, right? Some people don't have a bench vise. They do have a hammer. Hammer is kind of like, that's kind of like last resort, all right? You can use a hammer, but the key, once again, when you do a hammer, is don't hammer on the inside race. So a lot of people just kind of like, you know, hit right the middle of it, well, and hit really, really hard. As long as you kind of tap lightly around the outside race, I'll choose another one. Actually, before I do that one with the hammer, I'm going to show you, because now I have a bearing that is installed in a very tight Rockstar Pro fit. So how am I going to get that out? I know I can't get it out with my hands, all right? So that's the other part of this segment, is how to uninstall a bearing. So once again, in the ghetto, we improvise, and the best thing that I've found is if you can use kind of really any circular thing. I like to use, you know, duct tape, masking tape, any type of tape that has a big hole in it, because what you're going to do is you're going to use that as a jig. You know, take that, you're going to place your hub with the front face placing it, because basically you're going to press on this bearing and you just want that side open so it can kind of come out the other side, all right? So with that, there's a few different ways. One, you can kind of hammer out, but since I do have a vise, I'm going to open this guy up, place my duct tape in the vise, place my hub in there, and then I'm going to use a little socket. You know, it's basically anything. It could be a smaller bearing. It could be anything that's going to basically apply pressure. Now this is going to apply pressure to the inner race, but when you're uninstalling a bearing, there's no other option. There's no access to the outer race, so this is the only way to do it. It's not ideal, but it's the only option you got. So basically what I do is I put the socket in there, open this guy up, sorry. Hold it as you're going in there, and then you simply just start to crank the vise down. Alright, so now that we got the bearing out of the difficult Rockstar Pro hub, I'm going to show you the last resort. You don't have a bench vise, you couldn't get it on the table, you couldn't get it on the floor flip. We're down to the hammer. It's kind of an ugly thing. The other thing that reason you might resort to this is maybe your wheel is fully assembled and you don't want to take it apart to put it in your vise. You're kind of like lazy in the ghetto. Potentially this could work, but in general, it's a last resort. So using the hammer, the only tips that I'm going to say are kind of two things, right? In general, a hammer is actually okay. Just don't hammer on the inner race, especially not hard, because that impact is potentially going to damage your balls. You don't want to damage balls. So you're going to tap around the outer bit of the race. But the main thing that can kind of go wrong is the bearing can kind of get cockeyed, all right? So you don't want that to happen. So the thing is just nice, even pressure. I don't know if you guys can see. Nice, even pressure moving around the edge of the race. So you don't want to do a massive whack, because then that's going to make it even more cockeyed, and that's the worst thing that you can do. All right, so just kind of nice, even pressure. You can see gradually it's just kind of sinking down, so it's not... That's perfectly seated. Yeah, you can see it's nice and flush right there. So that, look, you know, you think using a hammer, not ideal. Obviously, we're not going to do that in the factory, but if it's all you got and you hit around that outer race and you're tapping around evenly, it's actually a pretty effective way to do it, all right? Just don't hit in the middle of the race. You might damage balls. All right, so speaking of those, if you guys, and one way that you can kind of check is if you have actually damaged them, just give a nice spin, and it should spin really smooth. Just no grit, no anything like that. Just no rough spots. So if you have actually done something wrong and you've whacked the thing, now the balls that we use for our bearings is a really high carbon steel. So look, they're actually quite difficult to damage. But the way that you're going to know if you have, give it a spin, make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay. If you guys ever do want to kind of look inside to see the ball bearings or clean them out or anything like that, while we're on the subject of those bearings, you can actually just use a knife and just kind of peel out that that rubber shield there. And that rubber shield is off, and then you got a nice little, and you can actually kind of see the ball, see what that kind of cross section looks like. To get that back in there, it's just a press. All right, so basically, I hope that helps you get your bearings in using tools that you might have around the house. If you like the series In the Ghetto, let us know about it. I hope it helps you. Leave some comments down below. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and yeah, tune in next time. Thanks.